I think leaning in is the ideal podcast interview.
As far as the eyes, though, if I look at you, will it look normal on the camera?
Yeah. So like, yeah, it's going to just be a side angle of you. So like it's going to be the whole time. It's just going to be the side angle.
So if I keep my head up like this and look over the TV, I'm good, right?
Oh yeah. Like looking at this right now, it looks good.
Okay.
And in fact, like I just hit the recording button, and I always like to kind of start them off with just like a little intro of like, hey, we're just kind of chatting it up before doing the introduction. So if you're good to go, I'm good to go, and we'll jump right in.
Yeah, I feel better than usual. I was thinking about football this afternoon and trying to get some Quattro's pizza.
There you go. Oh, now you're just playing to the crowd. Hey, everyone, and welcome to WTF Carbondale, the podcast where we talk to interesting people about their interesting lives, and we tie it all back to Carbondale somehow, whether they're folks that have been through here, are from here, have come back here, any sort of just like Carbondale-related folks. And exciting, got a new graphic in the upper left-hand corner here, same logo, but now I've added a little bit on the places where you can subscribe to the podcast, listen to it, get connected with it. Got the Anchor FM link, got the YouTube URL, and have the just at WTF Carbondale, because that's where it's at on pretty much all platforms that are not banned in the U.S. God. My guest today is Joe Cervantez. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
You are, yeah.
It needs the pronunciation Cervantez?
Yeah, I don't know if you have to do all that,
Yeah,
but
no,
yeah.
probably a little bit too much. You're right. I agree.
It's Cervantez is fine. Yeah, thanks.
So how'd you get to Carbondale, Joe?
So I came down in 1996, and I came down like a lot of people do to go to school. So I grew up in Chicagoland area, and when the time was right, I got down into Carbondale and never left. So
the first person that I had on the show all of earlier this week, was like, Carbondale's like a black hole, and I was like, yep, that's it. I mean, it's just got the gravitational pull. Once you're in.
Well, I always tell people I could afford to get down here, but once I graduated college, I couldn't afford to get back. So,
luckily, the cost of living is a little bit more manageable in this space. So
yeah.
you went to law school with so you were in law school with Alex Enyart, right? Or like
yes.
somehow, some way.
Yes.
Like I know somehow you bumped into Pat Kelly through all of your trials and tribulations on SIU campus. So like you were undergrad, and then your law, what is it, JD? What do you call it?
Right, yeah. So I did undergrad at SIU, and yeah, I do know Pat from undergrad, but I started grad school, left for the military for a while, enlisted here out of Carbondale, but ended up no idea how an infantry Marine would end up in law school, but I did, and they let me in. But I did go to school with Alex Enyart, two people from two different worlds, and I actually get along with Alex very well and became friends in law school.
Nice.
So yeah.
Nice. So now he still dabbles in Carbondale life from time to time, but we're trying to just keep him in the Metro East. Just keep
I think he's torn between his real roots, which is to be kind of a hellraiser, and civilian life over in the Metro East area. But we still collaborate on things. As different as we can be at times. We have a passion for finding points of friction in the system, and that's my political way of saying, finding some serious problems in the system, unfair things, and really going after them. So we've collaborated a few times, but I met him, and I'm glad I did. So.
I like that. As I've kind of grown into my understanding of who I am as a person, I've told people I'm interested in tearing down the system from the inside, right? Like what's broken and what needs fixed. But I kind of like your phrasing of it. It's a little bit softer, right? Finding those friction points that just need addressed and kind of moving it from there. And that's part of why I wanted to have you on the show. Just the one that I did a couple days ago with JP. I was like, listen, I don't just want to have people that I only see eye to eye with on the show, and I want to have people that we have differences of opinion, but we have similarities of opinion on things, and get them in here to talk. And so you being a Republican running for state's attorney kind of fit the bill in terms of somebody that's not in the same world as I am, but somebody that I can still talk to and find common ground with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that maybe we do a poor job of that when we get impassioned about things. And I think that we really can, well, let me put it this way. I realized exactly what you just said while I've been campaigning over the last maybe year and a half or 2 years, that most of us, I've probably heard politicians say it all the time, we have a lot more similarities than we have differences. And it's really true. Like, I've never heard anyone disagree with me that we should put our resources towards, juvenile delinquency and the juvenile courts. I've never heard anybody disagree that they want safe neighborhoods. Nobody's like, well, that's not my platform. No one disagrees that if someone commits a crime with a weapon, that they should pay the penalty and we should get them out of the community. A lot of the things that we disagree on are just these little sticking points, and a lot of times they have nothing to do with the position I'm running for. So, this has been a wake up call for me, and it goes to show you that you can go to undergrad and you can get degrees and go to law school and do all kinds of things, but the process of learning never stops, because now I'm learning even more as someone campaigning for an office than I had probably ever before. So.
Yeah, I mean, it'll it'll open your eyes, right? You always think like you know something, but I mean that's kind of the best approach anymore these days, is to be like, I don't know a damn thing. Like,
I start knowing less, I feel like, every day. So, but I'm getting better with coping with that, I think, is the thing. So
no, that's good. That's good. I had like a very specific question that like bumped up in my head, and the AC unit kicked on, and now I'm like, it's all it's all lost. So, what I mean, was it really just, couldn't leave, I'm here, whatever, let's go for it? I mean, what kept you in this area?
So, first off, I escaped from Chicago. I didn't just wake up one day and say, Mom and Dad, I'm going to go to college now, and they drove me down and wished me luck and gave me my I don't know, my savings trust fund or whatever. I had a rough time in Chicago. I lost my parents when I was younger. My dad was my only parent. Lost him when I was 10 years old, and kind of got kicked around a little bit in Chicago. Couch surfed from family member to family member, involved in the system, got in trouble a little bit. I changed high schools so many times, or junior highs too. I mean, I changed schools a lot, and I tried college, and I didn't have the skills. I should say eventually I dropped out of high school. I just didn't have the infrastructure around me to stay in school. I worked a lot, don't get me wrong, but I tried college. I knew that I needed college. My father, I guess, had raised me. I'd been with him long enough for him to make me realize that I needed to better myself in some way, shape, or form. So I always tried school, but I always dropped out. I tried community colleges, I tried different schools, and I realized that the more I kept hanging around the same people that I've always hung around, the more failures I was going to have. I was going to keep making the same mistakes and the same failures over and over again. And so I got in my car and drove as far as I could with still getting in-state tuition. And that was Carbondale. And there's always a group for you in Carbondale.
Yeah.
It absolutely, while Chicago just kicked me in the mouth while I was down, Carbondale just kind of opened its arms to me. And I kept staying in school and met probably some of my best friends I've ever had in undergrad, which I didn't have before. These are friends that were genuine, that I had a lot of things in common with, that weren't going to bring me down with them. And you stay around places that are going to be beneficial to you. So I never left. But when I did, it was because I enlisted in the military from down here. So it was those, I don't know if you remember those, there was like 2 or 3 houses with the white porches on them, right downtown Carbondale, the recruiting offices, the old ones, not too far from Harbaugh's. And I remember sitting on the porch there and enlisting and just thinking, Lord, what have I done? But yeah, that's I didn't leave, and then I enlisted from there. And once you enlist, that's your home of record, So if something happens to you, they ship you home to Carbondale if that's where you enlisted from. So
Wow. So one way or the other, when Uncle Sam says this is your home, this is now your home.
right, yeah, and I felt I really liked it. It was the small town feel, especially coming from Chicago. I loved sitting at Mary Lou's. I loved the small town feel. Everybody knew everybody, and I don't have to explain that to people that are watching a podcast. They all understand that. But so yeah, it became my home. And then I met a girl down here. We started having a family. So the rest is history, as they say.
So so that makes me interested, because you were like, well, do you remember this? And it's like, I remember Carbondale in a certain way because I'm 31, right? So I remember my chunk. How old are you, Joe?
I'm 45.
Okay, that's not bad. That's not like I didn't, dude. You could be your mid 30s, you could be your mid 40s, you could be
Well,
your mid 50s.
in that
You
case-
just have a very flexible look.
In that case, I'm 35.
There you go.
So,
Run with it, man. All day and forever. So get here, college, military. Was it like military and college at the same time, or like how does
well, I started in the Marine Reserves, and I figured I would get a little bit of extra help every month living. They give you a little bit of a stipend, I think, when you're in the reserves. So I joined in '97. I went to boot camp in the summertime, came back, and kept going through school. I was looking for anything that would help me get through school because I was never a good student. Wasn't a good student ever.
Yeah.
I got a lot better when after I got out of the military. But after 9/11, I was kind of the right age to go and do what I had to do. And I think me and a lot of friends kind of signed up full time, and I was looking for a job at the time because I had just graduated school.
Yeah.
And the Marines were just like, I was already good at that, and I figured that I could go and do that. So that's what I did. I got on the first plane that I could overseas. So
that's commendable actions.
I actually enlisted in the Marine Corps, and they gave me an administrative position. And when I got after 9/11, I got into the infantry, and so that was a bit of a change. But served overseas as an infantry squad leader, as a platoon sergeant, as an infantry leader, and as an infantry company gunnery sergeant. So I got a chance to go overseas several times.
It's an interesting crossover, going from the administrative role to a combat role, right? And then
Right.
okay, cool. Now I have some serious sets of skills that may apply to, I don't know, being a lawyer.
Yeah. So there's not too many of us that were in the Marine Corps infantry and then end up being an attorney.
Right.
So that was an interesting transition in itself. I was recruited out of the Marine Corps to be a NATO weapons advisor. So I would go to other countries and teach them how to operate like American forces do.
Okay.
Use the same procedures and such that we use. And it was just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than being in the infantry. And we were having our first boy, our first child, and I think I was done with getting shot at for a while. And I looked at, once again, every time I was in trouble, in my adult life, I looked at the university. So wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do with my degree, what I was going to do with my background as a Marine infantry person. If you put in what job you qualify for, they would put like security or police officer. And so I was looking into that, but I don't know why they let me into law school. I just don't know why. I remember writing a letter and saying I'm going to take the LSAT on my vacation from Afghanistan. I was going to come home from Afghanistan, take my LSAT, and then go back. And I remember writing a letter saying that I know that my GPA wasn't fantastic in college, and I know that I dropped out of high school and I have a GED, but if you let me into law school, I guarantee you I will make the law school proud.
That's nice. So it worked.
I guess it. I mean, I still go in my office every morning and look at my law degree, and I'm like, "You still there?" It's making sure that it happened. But it's odd to think, well, when you're 17 or 16 and you're thinking, yeah, school's not my thing, and then end up being an attorney one day. It's odd.
Because
So.
being an attorney is kind of just like being in school all the time. Like all you do is just read and write and then argue a little and then read and write and argue a little.
Well,
What does being a lawyer entail?
if you're active, it means that you are constantly learning what you don't know,
Yeah.
like all the time, because there's always problems that come up and you don't know the answers to them. Sometimes you do, and some attorneys just do the same thing over and over again, and they get really good at it. I'm a general practice attorney. I've been a prosecutor. I'm a defense attorney now. I do municipal law, so I advise cities and city councils on legal matters. I've done a number of federal and state civil cases. I've defended people against administrative agencies like the EPA, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and DCFS. So what I've done in the last so many years since I've been out of law school is unique in that I've done a lot of it, a lot of volume, but I've done a variety. And one thing is common in all those different types of law is that you're always questioning witnesses, you're always cross-examining witnesses, and you're always trying to get the facts into evidence. So it doesn't matter whether it's criminal or civil. I always pride myself on being able to do that and be able to prove my point and paint a picture. But ultimately, being an attorney is not just about reading and doing what you were saying. It's really, for some reason, it's very similar to being in the Marines. And people laugh and when I say that, and they say, well, did you practice law in the Marines? No, I was actually a grunt. I had a weapon, and that was my job. But what's unique about Marines is that we pride ourselves on standing in between. I wouldn't say just Marines, to the military. We kind of have that that sheepdog mentality of protecting other people, of standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. And that's often what we do as an attorney. Not all attorneys, but in my job, people call my law firm and they call me when there's nobody else to help them. When they have anxiety, when maybe they're going through the worst thing in their life, whether it be a divorce or they're arrested or they've been discriminated against, and they call me. And these are serious problems, and I get a chance to be the one that they call for that. So it's a very similar feeling, like, I got you. Nobody else got you. I got you.
Yeah.
So calm down, relax. Here's my number. If something comes up, let me know. And I feel good about it. I get that same kind of feeling, that same kind of pride. So
It's a lot to shoulder.
it can be, but it's a stressful job. It's not the most stressful job. I mean, there's other jobs that are stressful, but it is, because you have your law license on one side, and you're always trying to keep up with current events, and you're always trying to, and when you have a law license, you have to bring money in as a defense attorney. But I think as a prosecutor, I worked for years as a prosecutor. I worked in Williamson County and in Saline County as an assistant state's attorney. And I think that's really when I decided what I was going to do for my career. It's funny that you can be, 30-something years old and say, what I'm going to do? I'm going to be an attorney, and I want to be a state's attorney one day. So I probably decided I was going to do that later on in life, and that's when I decided what I was going to do when I was a prosecutor. So
what's like kind of that difference in feeling between being in your own private practice versus like you've been in state's attorney's offices and like just done the grind on the salaried side of things? Like,
there's so much to that. I would say to any attorney who wants to do either of those things, to try the other side out. It makes you a better attorney. Just as a prosecutor alone, when I first started being an assistant state's attorney, I took the moral high ground on everything, and I did exactly what everybody had done before me. But because of my history and my past, I started realizing that maybe some of the things that we've always done are not the best. And I don't know where that comes from. Maybe just from my history, maybe from being a leader in the Marines and trying to do things a little bit better, a little bit more perfect than the day before. But I definitely realized there's a better way to do things. I got my experience there, but I realized a lot of, as we said before, points of friction in a system that can be changed. But it is a machine, make no mistake.
Yeah.
And everybody will continuously do the same thing they did yesterday over and over again. And it's a machine that people rate its efficiency based on how quick and expedient the system is. And I say that with all seriousness. So when I say, well, how's the juvenile docket in such and such county? Oh, it's great. We get in, we get out. The dockets are a little light right now, and that's fine. We can get continuances when we need them. All the workers are great to work with. This is how we rate our system.
In and out is not the feeling that I want to have when we're talking about like young people going through the court system for the first couple of times. Like that's, it sounds like a fast food restaurant, what you just pitched. Be like, yeah, we're in, we're out, we're on it. Like lunch in 15 minutes or less, or it's free. It's like
it's getting sucked into the system. And then pretty soon you become one of the parts in that system, and you just keep working it over and over again. And whenever you toss something in there, everybody just kind of looks at you and say, well, this is gonna take some time. And not in a hateful way, or they just kind of don't know that we're doing it like that. And so every once in a while we have to file things in court to wake people up. But I knew that I was going to try some private defense work, and I did that, and it changes your perspective on everything. It changes your perspective on everything, on the entire system when you defend somebody versus when you're prosecuting. When you're prosecuting, you're only seeing them from a police report point of view. Yeah. And the defense attorney's job is to paint the picture of that person for you. The problem is that public defenders are always outnumbered, right? So that's a whole nother problem I could talk for hours on.
I mean, we got plenty of time, man. Well, it's the internet. It's like I always tell people.
It's a serious problem when you have 9 or 10 prosecutors and 4 public defenders. Mm-hmm. What are we saying about the system when we're not given equal time to defense as we are to prosecution? That's a problem in most counties across the country. I think that's something that needs to be reformed eventually, because as a prosecutor, I don't sit down and talk to the defendant. I only know what the defense attorney tells me. And if you don't have that public defender or that defense attorney that has time to paint that picture for you about who this individual is, then you have no other choice but to treat that person as a case number as opposed to a name and a person. As a defense attorney, I get to sit in my law office, maybe with my other attorneys, and listen to somebody talk about how their kid's a good kid and they need another opportunity, and this is where they went wrong, and all of the redeeming qualifications or qualities of that person. You hear that, but as a prosecutor, you don't hear that. And so the fight is not really just in the legal battles. The fight becomes trying to find places where you can get that information into the prosecutor, whether it be in a preliminary hearing or in a letter to the prosecutor or in a motion hearing or even at trial. But your job is to paint the most colorful, the most bright picture of that defendant as possible, and you lack being able to see that a lot of times as a prosecutor. So it changes your perspective on the system, having been a prosecutor and having been a defense attorney. At the same time, if I was only a defense attorney, I think I would have problems understanding the commitment and the responsibility you have to victims, because you have responsibilities to victims, you have responsibilities to their families. As a prosecutor, I've had to sit in rooms and talk to people who have lost loved ones because of a crime, and you have to sit and tell them maybe that this is going to be a long prosecution, or maybe sometimes that you can't prosecute this case, and you remember that as a defense attorney. And as a prosecutor, again, I hope to remember what it's like to be on that defense side and talking to the families, and so I think it's so important now that I've done both to have the experience on both sides. I just think it's more valuable to the community, and it's more valuable for all the participants in the courtroom, and I think going forward, I wouldn't have changed that path at all. So.
It sounds like a game of who gets the humanity, right? Who gets to be human, who gets to be more human than not, right? Caring for both victims and those who perpetrate crimes, but understanding that many of the people who perpetrate crimes are they themselves victims of a system or society in a particular way, and God, that's a real interesting juxtaposition, man.
Yeah,
That's-
we put walls up so much because of the procedures that are necessary in a lot of cases. I was working a juvenile docket. I was a juvenile prosecutor in Saline County, and I remember we have a lot of attorneys in the courtroom. We have an attorney for each child. We have an attorney for the parents. For each parent, we have an attorney. So it's hard for the prosecutor to go and actually talk to the kids. Yeah, this just doesn't happen. And I needed so much more information while I was getting sometimes about what's going on. And I remember asking a defense attorney down there who I'm still close friends with, hey, can I talk to the kid? Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
And she's like, I don't know if that's ever happened, but you can if you want to. And I was like, I promise whatever he tells me when we talk, I won't use against him. Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to talk to him. And was given an opportunity to sit kneecap to kneecap with him and ask him what was going on. And he thought his life was so bad, the mean streets of Harrisburg. I'm like, it can be rough. And I don't,
sorry, I didn't mean to downplay that. That wasn't.
I know, but I was saying it in a way where, there's worse places.
Yeah.
You have, and some kids, they have both parents at home.
Yeah.
And you have to try to figure out what's going through their head, that they think that their life is so bad that they can't be redeemed, that they can't fix what's broken. The truth of the matter is they can, and sometimes I have to be able to be a part of that conversation and not leave it for 2 or 3 or 4 attorneys to tell me that. But I realize that our juvenile system can change, and it needs to be more of a problem-solving court than adversarial. And if we make it problem solving, then I think we can lower the recidivism rate with kids and not have to see them when they're adults. And I think that's so important. In fact, that's probably the premise of my entire platform, is to make sure that we're taking care of crime the way we need to, but at the same time, we're reducing it by making sure our kids don't get involved in it in the first place.
Well, so it's interesting that you bring that up, because in terms of just a value to society on, changing people's lives so that there's not a continuation of, a costly system of law enforcement that sees money go away from fixing the problem and into, penalizing the problem. And it's like, what can, in your mind, if you're talking about having served and municipalities and counties and whatever in government law, having pursued criminal law activity on both sides of it, like, what do you see as what impact a change in your mentality, like you're presenting, provides for all these other systems of government that have to spend a significant amount of money on law enforcement and on, the court system and all that? Like, is there just all of a sudden a magic switch that we fix a bunch of stuff on one part of the life cycle of a human being, and all of a sudden there's just not as much need for something else on the other? Or what does that look like?
Remember old school stuff that you would have to warm up before it started working?
Wait, say that one more time.
Remember, a lot of stuff, older made stuff. You couldn't just switch it on and it was working automatically.
Yeah,
you would have to say, well, let's warm the car up. You ever remember warming the car up?
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't warm the car up anymore. We just,
That's carburetors versus fuel injection, but neither here nor there.
Right, exactly. Yeah. No, I understand. Trust me, I understand it. But I always remember that as a kid. It's like, okay, go warm the car up, and you go turn the car on and have to let it run for like 30 minutes before it's usable. I always see, like, getting into a state's attorney's office, the switch is the mentality.
Yeah.
So understand that you can't keep letting the same thing happen over and over again and expect different results, right?
Yeah.
That when you're bailing water, meaning you're taking reports in and you're filing reports and you're sending people where they need to go, whether it's incarceration or probation or wherever, that when you're doing that, if you're not, that's just bailing water. You'll do that for the rest of your life. Yeah. You'll do that for 30 years over and over again. And when you do that, you have to ask yourself, are you doing, are you getting 30 years experience, or are you just getting 1 year of experience and doing the same thing 30 years in a row.
Okay.
So we can't keep doing the same thing. While we're bailing water, we want to make sure that we're fixing the leak, so water isn't continuously coming into the boat. I explain it that way because flipping a switch to me is changing a mentality of how we think about crime and how we think about the individual who comes into the criminal justice system. Make sure that we're treating people the way they need to be treated, with dignity, with respect, and that their lives are valuable. That because they made a mistake, there's people that need to go to prison. There just are. I've met them. If you don't know them, if you haven't met one, let me know. I'll introduce you. They exist.
Yeah.
But that's few and far between. Most people are good people that made a mistake.
Okay, so that's an interesting one, right? Because I myself, in the way that I think about crime and poverty and the intersection of all sorts of the wrongs of the world that continue to create more wrongs of the world. What does somebody who really needs prison look like versus somebody who really does not need prison look
Right.
like? I mean, because we're talking about prison as essentially this functional separation from society.
Yeah. So real quick on that matter, I think that when you flip a switch and you change the mentality and you change the system about how people think, and you get the assistant state's attorneys and the staff to buy in, and the judges see what you're trying to do as a state's attorney, and you start changing that frame of mind, then you just got to let it warm up and run a little while. And hopefully when somebody else comes and replaces you, they're kind of stuck in that new system, right? Because now that's the way it works. But it takes somebody to change that and warm it up and start getting people to think that that's how the system is supposed to work. So that's what I hope to do. I hope to flip a switch on the mentality, and not just be punitive, but try to be reformative, restorative, and try to give individuals the benefit of the doubt. And in your question about what does that look like, well, it's kind of like the definition that we talked about in law school of pornography. You just know it when you see it, right? And that's why it's important to know the social history of the person before you allow a plea, or before you go to trial, or even before you charge. It's so important to have that picture that I mentioned painted for you, so you know what you're doing before you do it. But you know them when you see it. I want to say that you've exhausted the possibilities and from community-based groups.
Yeah.
And when you exhaust those and you can't do anything else, or when the community is in danger, when you can't say to yourself that the community will be safe if this person is out again. If you can't say that, then you have to do whatever you can to make sure that the community is safe. That there's no question about that. And me and any other person running for a state's attorney, we would all agree on it. I think it'd be 100, 100 out of 100. We would all say that if someone's dangerous, we keep them off the street. That's a no-brainer. Where differences lie is what we do with the other 99% of the people that come into the system, and how active are we outside of the office for the juvenile docket. So those are my 2 points that I think need to be fixed. I think we all agree on who's dangerous.
Yeah, is that really kind of the primer, is like violent acts and the likelihood of continuing to participate in violent acts? I mean, that really defines.
So there's 2 models that I noticed from state's attorneys, and one of them is the most dominant one, or predominant one, and that is 3 questions that we ask when someone's arrested. Was the law broken? Who broke it? And what should the punishment be?
That who broke it one sounds a little iffy, right?
Right.
The who, like, if we're looking for a flaw in the system, I think question number 2 of like who broke it.
That is a punitive model, right? So, was the law broken? Who broke it? And what should the punishment be?
Yeah.
And that gets very subjective as far as what the punishment should be. If you go from one county to the other, it could be different. Like, well, they did this, and so this is usually the sentence when somebody does this. That doesn't do really anybody good. And that's that model of asking those 3 questions hasn't worked for our country for the last 50 years. We know that because as crime increases or decreases, our prison population maintains a steady increase almost always. And that just means that we're not making the right decisions. The questions that I want to ask, and this is what I mean by changing the way we think in the office, is there a victim? Who is the victim? And how can we restore the victim back to how they were before? If we do that, we do a few things. One, we put the victim at the center of the criminal justice system as opposed to the defendant. I think that's deserving because ultimately what we're trying to do is what some people would say punish, but what we're trying to do is keep the community safe and do justice. So I think if we do that, we're keeping the victim at the center, but at the same time, we're allowing the defendant at some type of redemption, at some type of rehabilitation, some type of restoration, because ultimately the community is safer not when they come back from prison and they're a felon and they have nowhere to go. It's hard for them to get a job. It's hard for them to survive. It's safer when they've learned their lesson and now they're in a work program, or now they're working and they're contributing to the community. That's what we want. We want less felons in the community, and we want more people that are contributing to the community. And I think when we ask those questions, we do a better job of it. So
that's I mean a different way of looking at it indeed. I mean, that if we pivot a system wholly on the person that's committed an act related to the words that we put on text and then, stamped as a society and called it law, versus who is the person really affected when a law is broken.
Yeah, the idea is that justice is only as good or bad as the act that we are calling unjust. So it's funny, we learned it, no harm, no foul back in the day. But we want to make sure that going forward, they're not a problem to the community. We do that by installing and implementing a bunch of different programs that help people and helps us identify the underlying problems of crime. That's so important. And in that victim model that I told you about, who the victim is and what happened and how can we fix it, we need to be able to have programs to divert people from the criminal justice system and get them back on track. That's so important because we're looking at a very small slice of the pie of people who are violent offenders and need to go to prison. There's all the rest of the cases. You don't just dismiss them because they're no big deal. We want to make sure they never happen again. I have so many examples as a defense attorney that I wouldn't have as a prosecutor. One recently is that I have ran into somebody who was convicted of possession of methamphetamine. And it was the first time ever, and she was given probation for a couple years, for 24 months, and finished her probation. And by the way, was only tested a handful of times in 24 months. And 2 weeks after she finished her probation, she was picked up on a possession of methamphetamine charge. Again. And she was arrested, she bonded out, and it was 60 days until her first appearance. So our community has somebody who's walking around doing whatever she would do, who has an addiction, has a disease according to the American Medical Association, right? Substance abuse disorder. And she has no help, right? So the court system found her once and didn't intervene, didn't divert her from the system, didn't help her rehabilitate. Instead, we put her in probation, which tracked her. Let's be honest. They're a department that's not set up to rehabilitate, they're set up to track.
Yeah. Which,
by the way, 17% of our incarceration population in Illinois are from technical violations of probation. Yeah.
So nearly 1 in 5.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And so we bring her in a second time and say, possession of methamphetamine. And I guarantee you the report says that they pulled her over, they talked to her, they noticed that her license was suspended, they searched her, found methamphetamine, and then that's the end of the report. The prosecutor at that time, when she was arrested, doesn't know about probably at that time her previous methamphetamine issue. And we didn't identify her as someone with an addiction. And so we kick her back out on the street for 60 days. What does somebody who's drug abused do? What do they do for 60 days?
Yeah.
They,
Well, especially when you're in a stressful situation.
they use drugs again. And sometimes, I'm not saying her, but if you're talking about small-time property crimes, trespass, criminal trespass, theft from retail stores, that's the window when these things happen, right? And we don't have an adequate program to divert her right now in Jackson County. There's just not. And people will tell you, well, we can get her treatment. That's usually done right now in the system way down the road. Defense attorney has to sometimes ask for that, or we do that as a measure after sentencing, or as sentencing. I mean, we don't do that while she's going through the system. That's when she needs it right now. So identifying that problem as soon as she's arrested and getting her an evaluation immediately before she's released or upon release, so important. To have her in rehabilitation right now, so important, so that she doesn't reoffend, or the people in the community don't see her coming back to their property, breaking into a car, trespassing on property, these little crimes that sometimes people don't take seriously. But if you're that person that lives in that community, you don't want that happening in your neighborhood, So the system's broken. It's not just in Jackson County. It's everywhere. I can't say everywhere, but it's across the country for sure. Yeah. There's prosecutors' offices right now that need to change how we look at substance abuse disorder. We need to change how we look at poverty, and we need to change how we look at mental health illness. The system's not set up to identify these problems upon arrest, and the system's not meant to help people while they're going through the process. It's really set up to help people afterward. But drug courts do that. Treatment courts do that. Family treatment courts do that. Juvenile diversion programs do that. Informal juvenile diversion programs do that. That's before we charge kids with crimes. All those programs are set up to get people, identify the problem right away, get them help before we start making decisions that are going to impact the community for the rest of that person's life and for a long time in the community. Every decision that we make in the state attorney's office disrupts the community. And I think prosecutors, it's about time that they realize that. It's very difficult to continue to remember that your decision disrupts so many issues in the community. Suspending someone's driver's license. You're talking about a traffic court. It's kind of a joke. Oh, you become a prosecutor, you're stuck in traffic court. You got to work your way up through traffic court. That has huge ramifications on people in our community. They're 17, 18 years old with a bad driving record and no credit, and we expect these people to thrive and be successful in our community when we're not helping them. Prosecutors need to start making sure that they understand that their decisions impact the community. So,
yeah. No, I mean, I've seen it. Arguably, we've all got friends, family, acquaintances somewhere. Somebody has broken a law, and we know them, and they've gone to prison. It's not like we live in a bubble, and everybody's, there's this group of people over here that it's just criminal life, and they live there, and they're the ones that have to deal with the court system, and then everybody else over here just lives, behind this, golden fence.
Yeah.
Do you have friends that have you've seen, not as an attorney but as a person, have to hit the system and be like, damn, that happened to so and so?
Yeah, too often. I've been acquainted with people that have made it, and I've been acquainted with people that haven't. And I know people that are my age and maybe a little older that have been in constant contact with the criminal justice system. Constant. So it's a problem, because I honestly do believe that every life is valuable. We just have to be able to, some people need more support in other areas than others. It's simple as that. And I always find that the community resources are often there. We just don't utilize them to their fullest. There's a lot of faith leaders in the community that would love to help, that if you picked up the phone, they would get a van to help somebody get somewhere. There's community-based organizations like the Warming Center that I was able to walk around the other day. There's people that volunteer their time to do amazing things to help others. Good Samaritan and other areas. There's a brand new rehabilitation center that opened up in Carbondale that I was able to be at the ribbon cutting for, called Recover Us. And there's a number of other ones, and we need to make sure that we have them on speed dial. and that they know that as a state's attorney, I want to make sure that they are involved in the system. That if they want to help, I'm going to say, "Oh yeah, you want to help? All right, well I got something for you. Help with this."
You're asking for it, you're going to get it.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think it's also important to bring other community resources in and work outside of the courthouse as a leader in the county. Make sure that we get as many community-based resources that we have, and also grants. We don't use grants enough. There's an actual office of programs at the Department of Justice. They have 370 some odd programs, many of them for juveniles, and grants available for each one, needs assessments that can be done for each one, and we don't utilize any of those.
Well, I mean, I guess, and on the other side of that, right, like we've got a bunch of police departments that are local, right? I know at least here in Carbondale, right, outgoing Chief Jeff Grubbs was like deeply ingrained in activity at Quantico, like working with the FBI to sharpen whatever, law enforcement skills the FBI, imparts on, local law enforcement officials. But it's like, okay, well, there are 370 some odd programs related to this that may not be necessarily the tactics and policing, but where are we drawing on those pools of activity from at the federal level?
Yeah, we don't, and I think with the median income in Jackson County and with the level of poverty, joblessness, I think that you'd be surprised how much we would qualify for. I found grants, just basic Google searches, finding grants that were unapplied for, hundreds of thousands of dollars in programs that we don't utilize. Williamson County actually has 4 victim advocates that are on grant funding. One of them is the juvenile victim advocate. There's an assistant juvenile victim advocate. There's a victim advocate, and there's a domestic violence victim advocate. Imagine if I came to your job and gave you 4 employees full time.
And just, here you go.
Yeah.
Do a better job.
Right.
Here's resources to do.
Right.
So.
Imagine the type of resources, the type of things that we could do for victims if we had additional workers. I'm not saying that those are available for Jackson County on day one, but I am saying that there will be a grant writer.
Yeah. Well, and you're always looking for, right? How do I alleviate the pressure on X organization, X institution, et cetera, et cetera? How do I make it easier for the cops? How do I make it easier for the women's center? How do I make it easier for the warming center to just do their jobs of filling in the gaps in places? Or, again, we'll argue about it all day long about how we put too much onus on our police officers to do a bunch of shit that, training with a gun doesn't get them there for, right? And it's like, okay, cool. How many more things can you ask a cop to do?
Right.
Right. How much more stuff? I think of the cartoon that's floated around on the internet for several months that's like, talking about defunding the police. Well, defund the police sounds scary, but then, okay, well, what is it really? Oh, well, we're talking about taking 8 different activities out of the realm of officers and letting them just patrol and look for proper crime and stop proper crime or investigate proper crime versus having to deal with somebody having a mental health breakdown outside of, on the street somewhere.
Right. Yeah. I think it's been a fine line walking because police officers have come on under a lot of scrutiny, and I empathize with them because as an infantry guy in Iraq, we've done a lot of policing actions. Their jobs are dangerous. Imagine how if you've ever been stopped or involved in an incident with police, you imagine the anxiety and the stress that causes. Now imagine if you were on the other side and you did 8 or 10 of those stops a night. They have a tough job. Make no mistake about it. And we've only piled more and more things on top of them. And that's because we haven't adequately responded to the needs of the community. And we haven't realized that there are underlying reasons for crime. I think that some of the solution right away is to look at corrections and our jails a little bit different than what we look at them now. Maybe it's a far cry to have a social worker in a car go out to a home, which we do, by the way, for DCFS and a couple other organizations. But
so there's like a format for this.
There is a format, but imagine having instead of 10 jailers, 9 jailers, and a social worker that can evaluate and identify problems at the jail. Having that person on call all the time at the jail so that on day one of the arrest, we've had that person evaluated, and included in a report is an evaluation, not to be used against them in court, but so that the prosecutor can start looking at possible avenues for diversion and treatment and whatever else. And they may end up being prosecuted. But what about being prosecuted and also getting help so they're better the second time? So I think we need to, we're so binary in our culture, aren't we? That it's good or bad. Up or down.
You want to talk about binary in a culture? I'm sorry to cut you off, but this cracked me up. I drove through Virgins the other day, and I was surprised to see a Biden-Harris sign smack dab in the middle of Virgins. And whose sign was next to it but Joe Cervantez?
Is that right?
And you drive a little bit further down the road, and there's a Trump sign in the ground. And I'll be darned about whose sign is next to that Trump sign. And it's yours too.
Say it ain't so.
Oh man, it cracks. It's interesting to see in this day and age, right? That there is still some way to break through.
There is
the duopoly of thought.
Yeah.
That we experience here, and to have seen that was just, I mean, that was one of the things that kind of, I thought about, okay, well, where do I want to go next with interviews? How do I want to broaden it? So, it's not just people that think like me, that are on my side of the political spectrum, and kind of a couple more qualifiers here. And then when I saw that earlier this week, I was just like, yep, if we're really launching this, I'm like, kind of try and get Joe on this show and
that
just let him talk.
That's exactly. I'm glad you said that, because we are really binary, and to the point of law enforcement and their roles, we either think that the police have to be completely gone, or we have to have a militarization of the police department because crime is so bad. That's right now Republican and Democrat. They want to defund or they want to militarize. There's so many solutions in between. It's not even funny. And when I talk to people door to door, no matter where I am, a lot of people agree. I've sat down, in people's living rooms and talked to them about that. People think that having a social worker or some kind of drug counselor at the jail all the time is a good route to explore. We already funded to have a jail. We already have payroll. Yeah. We already have an infrastructure for them. And we know that we have to identify problems early, or else, one of the big problems the community has is they say, well, is this catch and release, this revolving door. They get arrested on Friday night, they're back out on Sunday night or Saturday night, and they're doing the same thing again. Having somebody in the jail, it's not defunding the police, but it's identifying problems. It's not having the police do things that they're not supposed to have. Yeah. So there's solutions that are in between that everybody lives with. But I think going down the road, we're going to have jails be more, I guess, diverse as far as who's working there and what kind of services that we can offer them. But as far as the signs, hey, I have that just happened.
I mean, your signs go out, they end up in people's yards, and they end up in all types of people's yards.
Well, I've never had anybody disagree and say, we don't want safer communities. I've never had anyone disagree and say that, we shouldn't concentrate or focus on our youth and juvenile dockets. Yep. I've never had anybody disagree with me, when they say that when somebody's a victim, they should be supported, that we should have all the services we need for them to get them back and get them some closure. So, the things that I'm dealing with in my campaign, they're not red or blue issues. They're just right or wrong, So.
Well, then there are so many people out there that, it's they're just interested in preserving just a little bit of safety and sanity in their own world. Now, granted, their positions may be ones that we critique a little bit more heavily because they don't live in in a way that is attacking their safety or sanity, right? Think about somebody living in a suburban space versus somebody living in a more impoverished space, right? That they don't necessarily just want punishment for punishment's sake. They want punishment because they think that punishment is the thing that's going to keep them safe.
Right.
And that's not necessarily the case. And
No.
we got to make that. They got to make that pivot. One more thing I want to talk about while we wind down on my give or take hour here. That's kind of where I'm wanting to keep these at. I've found that we were able to get through a lot of good content in an hour, but not go too crazy, and then we all get to go about our day. You've been doing some stuff with the library, right? Like you've been lawyering in the library.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
How did that come about? Like where did that all grow from?
So I know the administrative professionals in my office that I employ, my assistants, they're going to be cheering for me when I tell them this, but they yell at me all the time because I have a really bad habit of taking pro bono cases, and it's a bad habit if you have a business. It's a great habit if you're just a human, a good person. I love to take good cases and help people out that need help, that have nowhere else to go, or that I know that I can help them and do it well. So I have a habit of taking these cases. I'm known for helping out veterans in the community with legal issues. I'm known for taking cases and I call them low bono cases because sometimes they pay me, but not what you would normally pay an attorney. And I think people realize that, and I think just somebody asked me if I'd be interested in doing that. I kind of had a reputation for helping people out when I could as an attorney, and so my secretaries always have to remind me. They're always like, Joe, we have bills that we have to pay in our office. I'm like, I know, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. But lawyer in the library was just like a natural transition for me. It gave me an opportunity to do what I do, and that is try to give legal advice at something at a without having to people to break the bank to try to hire an attorney. Yeah. A lot of times people don't need to hire an attorney. They just need to know where to go. And a lot of times they don't need an attorney at all. They just need, I guess, some reassurance that they're doing the right thing or that everything's going to be okay. Lawyer in the library is great for two reasons. One, it allows people to be able to just double check and see before they go and make that appointment and spend the money on an attorney, whether they need one in the first place or they can do it themselves. That's the primary purpose, I think. The second is that it supports the library. That's the second reason why I do that.
Do they get grant funding for what?
I believe some. There's lawyer in the library programs throughout Southern Illinois now. I believe some of them do and some of them don't. Okay. But the role of the library has changed drastically over the last maybe the last decade or two. And the libraries, I think, have struggled to make sure that they're relevant. It sounds horrible, but in this age of computer information, I think they're fighting to find their place. And I think Carbondale Library has done a really good job doing that, and a lot of other libraries are following. But there's so much more that they've been doing that they traditionally haven't done, and I think it's important to support the libraries and make sure that we still have a place to go to. So
again, not to cut you off, I keep getting the thought spur in my head, and I was like trying to think about, okay, well, what is a format for jail reformation that is out there and can be modeled, and it's almost kind of like the library, like what has changed in the world of libraries and becoming a space for social work and community development and like addressing problems and issues, not just a place where you go check out a book and research and read. Like, what do you see as like some changes that have occurred in the world of libraries that you think are applicable in jail spaces?
That's interesting. I think it's exactly what you just said. I mean, you answered that. I mean, in your question.
So I was little too leading. Just to
that's right. I absolutely and I think that's one of the reasons why I love what they're doing. I think the jail system, the criminal justice system, needs to do the same thing and find out what their role is as we evolve as a community, as a country. And libraries are doing that right now. So I was excited to help them out. Actually, I think that they should provide services like that, and going forward, they're going to have to. So,
awesome. Well, I appreciate the time, Joe. This has been an enjoyable conversation. Something that I had no expectations set up for, but you have you've done. This has been just an eye opener, right? On a lot of things. And I hope that the people that watch this kind of see it as such.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. And I know I stray sometimes as I like to talk about what I do.
A podcast's all about straying.
Yeah, well, then I'm your man for the job because I can get off on a tangent. But, ultimately I just want to do my part. And I think my part now with all the things that I've gone through in my life, the mistakes, and there's a lot of them, and working on both sides of the courtroom, this is the next step. I think this is where I can do my thing in this community. My contribution is in that state's attorney's office. So I appreciate the time. Any platform that we can give anybody that's interested in helping the community, I think that's important because platforms are hard to find nowadays.
Well, and at the end of the day, win, lose, or draw, to get out there and say the things, right, is that if you lose, if you win, having just said what you've said to so many people and make the want for change occur at a very individual level throughout whatever space you're trying to represent, I think is worth the work that you've done and the effort that you put in thus far. So
I appreciate it.
Thank you for that. And that is episode number 3. We're going to keep expanding with all the interesting folks that we can find, talking to them about all the interesting things that we do and tying it right back to our little lovely hometown of Carbondale. Have a good one, y'all.